I'm going to talk about toxicology and understanding dose response. I'm going to begin this with talking about alcohol because this week we were supposed to study this by doing an experiment on an invertebrate called Daphnia. And we are going to put them in different concentrations of alcohol to see, to observe under the microscope the invertebrate's physiological response. Okay, and we would have been able to make a curve kind of like this curve that you see here. So, what this curve is saying, essentially, alcohol is a toxin, and the rate at which it is consumed, the dose, will determine its effect on the body. So you can have, let's say, a tiny amount, maybe the amount that might be in cough syrup, and it wouldn't have any effect, right? Your liver would quickly detoxify your blood of that, and you wouldn't feel an effect. But let's say you have a full beverage, and you might feel you might feel giddy after having a cocktail, okay? And none of you are having cocktails yet, I know, right? So anyway, when people feel that giddy feeling, that alcohol has already met its effective dose and it's affecting the body in a way that otherwise would not operate without that substance. So, if when a person starts feeling giddy, then they're it's affecting their brain and they're not using their best judgment and they're going to keep drinking and it might make them feel a little drowsy, a little sleepy because ultimately alcohol is a depressant. And if we were observing the Daphnia, we'd actually see the Daphnia's heart starting to slow and taking on that effect. And now generally most people they power through that drowsy feeling. They power through wanting to go to sleep. They might drink all the way up into the point where they go completely unconscious, pass out, and black out. Okay? And if they power through that, they might get to a point where physiologically it's affecting their central nervous system, and now they have labored breathing. If we were observing the Daphnia, we would actually watch their heart slow until the point that they stop beating at all, because alcohol toxicity can kill you. There is a lethal dose of alcohol. So, what is toxicology? Essentially, it's the branch of science concerned with the nature, effects, and detection of poisons. It's also the measurement and analysis of potential toxins, intoxicating or banned substances, and prescription medications present in a person's body. So, how is this all determined? So, we use a dose response graph, and in this particular graph, what this is showing, first of all, I want you to notice the x-axis is indicating the increasing dose, so the amount a subject is given, and the y-axis, this is the response, like it indicates at what dose a response, like as soon as one of the test subjects has a response, it's put in the graph based on at what point, what percentage of the sampled subjects experience that response. So at the ED10, for example, that indicates that 10% of the tested subjects got the effective dose. If this was alcohol, they started feeling 10% started feeling guilty after this amount, whatever that amount might be. And then at ED 50, that would indicate that 50% of the individuals sampled felt the response by the time this level was given. And finally, ED 90 means the effective dose, like at this dose, 90% of the individuals sampled felt the affected or the effective dosage. Okay, so this is what this is the effective dose or the therapeutic dose if we are talking about medication. Now over here we're looking at the toxic dose. So the toxic dose indicates Like, here's the point where somebody goes unconscious or starts throwing up. At this level, this dosage, 10% of the population is already experiencing that effect. 50% are experiencing it at this dose. 90% are experiencing it at this dose. So that's what all of that means. Then now we also have what's called the therapeutic index. And actually shows better on this, where you can see that, like, let's say at 90%, there's still a margin of the population that barely feel an effect, but yet the toxic effect has already taken effect for some of the subjects sampled here. So this, between here and here, this is what is known as the therapeutic index. And generally, so the therapeutic index is the margin between the therapeutic or the effective dose and then the toxic dose. The wider the margin, the safer the dose, because you don't want this and this to overlap very much. Okay. And finally, this is another good example of dose-response relationship. The dose makes the poison. You can see here the same exact drug. So phenobarbital is given to dogs for seizures. And 50% of the dogs sampled will get the effective dose at, let's see, just under 5 milligrams per kilogram. Okay? But if you were to give a dog like at around 20, like if you accidentally gave that dog multiple doses, there's at least a pretty wide margin therapeutic index here. But you can also see that the same drug, what would otherwise help the animal, can also be lethal to the animal. It's a very important thing to remember, that what can save you can also harm you. And that is dose response.